You wake up every morning and tell yourself you're building something meaningful. You scroll through your phone, check your bank account, and convince yourself that playing it safe is wisdom. But deep in your chest, there's a burning question you're afraid to ask out loud. When did you become so comfortable with being ordinary? I am Solomon, and I have watched empires rise from dust and kings fall into poverty. But today, I want to share with you the most dangerous knowledge I have ever encountered. Not from my own reign, but from a man who understood power in ways that would make pharaohs tremble. Niccolo Machiavelli didn't just write about princes. He wrote the blueprint for anyone bold enough to transform from invisible to inevitable. Picture yourself 1 year from now, not hoping for change, not waiting for opportunity, but commanding it. Walking into rooms where your presence shifts the energy, speaking words that turn ideas into income. This isn't about getting lucky or grinding harder. This is about becoming the type of person that wealth naturally flows toward. The comfortable lie you've been living ends today, because what I'm about to reveal isn't motivation. It's mathematics. It's the calculated strategy that separates those who dream about riches from those who architect them. Machiavelli understood that fortune doesn't favor the hopeful. It bows to the prepared. You have two choices in this moment. You can close this video and return to the safety of your current life, wondering what could have been. Or you can stay and discover how to build an empire from nothing but strategic thinking and relentless execution. If you're ready to stop being a subject in someone else's kingdom and start ruling your own destiny, then subscribe right now. Because the transformation you're about to witness will demand everything you think you know about wealth, power, and purpose. The prince inside you is waiting to be awakened. Number 1, personal transformation and strategic decision. You have been living a lie so comfortable, so accepted by society, that you mistake it for wisdom. Every morning you wake up, put on clothes that feel like a uniform, and walk into a building where your dreams go to die slowly, painfully, one paycheck at a time. You tell yourself this is responsibility. You call it maturity. But in the depths of your soul, you know the truth. You are dying by degrees, trading your finite days for the illusion of security. I am Solomon, and I have observed the rise and fall of kingdoms. But the greatest tragedy I have witnessed is not the collapse of empires. It is the moment when a human being accepts mediocrity as their final destination. The moment they stop believing they were born for something greater than following orders and counting days, until retirement. Machiavelli understood what most never grasp. Fortune does not reward the obedient. It rewards the audacious. He wrote that it is better to be feared than loved, but there is something even more powerful than both. It is better to be necessary. And you become necessary not by following the path everyone else walks, but by daring to carve your own. I once knew a man who worked for 20 years in the same office, same desk, same routine. He had convinced himself that consistency was virtue. But one night, staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, he saw not a man of principle, but a prisoner who had built his own cage. The salary that once felt like success now felt like chains. The security he prized had become the very thing preventing his escape. That night, he made a choice that would either destroy him or transform him. He decided to become dangerous. The transformation begins with a single, terrifying realization. Your current life is not your destiny. It is merely your starting point. Every great fortune, every empire, every legend began with someone who looked at their circumstances and declared war against limitation. They understood that wealth is not an accident. It is not luck. It is the inevitable result of strategic thinking applied with relentless consistency. Your skill, whatever it may be, is your kingdom waiting to be claimed. But first, you must identify it. Not what you are good at, but what you could master if you treated it like your life depended on it. Because it does. This is not about finding your passion. This is about choosing your weapon. Entrepreneurship, investing, writing, speaking, building. Choose one. Study it like a general studies war. Become so formidable in your chosen domain that the market has no choice but to reward you. The man in the mirror made his choice. He chose entrepreneurship because it offered what his soul craved most, not just money but sovereignty, the right to build something that bore his name, the power to create value from nothing but vision and determination. He understood that every day spent building someone else's empire was a day stolen from building his own. Stop lying to yourself about tomorrow. Tomorrow is a myth designed to keep you comfortable today. The only moment that matters is this one. The only choice that matters is the one you make right now. Will you remain a subject in someone else's kingdom, or will you dare to become the architect of your own empire? Number 2. Isolation and rebuilding the power circle. The moment you decide to rise, the world will try to pull you back down, not out of malice but out of fear. Your transformation threatens their comfort. Your ambition exposes their resignation. When you announce your intention to build something great, to escape the gravitational pull of ordinary life, watch carefully who celebrates and who subtly discourages. You will learn everything you need to know about who deserves space in your new world. The hardest prison to escape is not one built of iron and stone. It is the prison of low expectations disguised as friendship. These are the people who love you just enough to keep you small. They will remind you of your failures. They will question your sanity. They will offer you comfort when what you need is challenge. And in their eyes, you will see the reflection of who you used to be, threatening to send you back into familiar mediocrity. Picture a tree trying to grow in a forest of weeds. The weeds do not hate the tree, but their very presence steals the sunlight, the nutrients, the space the tree needs to reach its potential. The tree faces a choice: remain stunted among the weeds, or find the courage to transplant itself to ground where giants grow. When I announced my intention to leave the comfortable path, the response was immediate and brutal. Friends who had once encouraged my dreams suddenly became experts on my limitations. Family members who claimed to want my happiness became prophets of my failure. They spoke of security, of risks, of all the reasons why ordinary was enough. But in their words, I heard something else. I heard the sound of their own abandoned dreams crying out for company. That night, I made a decision that felt like cutting off my own limbs. I began the process of strategic isolation, not because I stopped caring about these people, but because I cared more about the person I was becoming. I understood that transformation requires a kind of ruthless selfishness. You cannot save others from drowning while you are still learning to swim. Isolation is not punishment, it is preparation. In the silence left by departed voices of doubt, you create space for new voices, voices of those who have already walked the path you seek to travel. Voices of those who understand that impossible is just another word for untried. Your new circle will not be found in comfortable places. They will be found where discomfort is transformed into opportunity. I began to study not celebrities but architects of real wealth, men and women who had taken raw ambition and forged it into empires. I read their books, watched their interviews, analyzed their decisions. But more importantly, I began to think like them. I replaced gossip with strategy. I replaced entertainment with education. I replaced the language of limitation with the vocabulary of possibility. The friends who truly mattered understood. They respected the distance I needed to create. The ones who didn't belong in my new world revealed themselves through their resistance to my growth. Some relationships ended with arguments. Others simply faded as our paths diverged. Both endings were necessary. Your environment is your destiny. Show me your 5 closest relationships, and I will predict your future with mathematical precision. Surround yourself with the ambitious, and you will become ambitious. Surround yourself with the defeated, and you will learn to accept defeat. This is not cruelty. This is strategy. The person you are becoming deserves to be surrounded by people who believe in giants, not those who have made peace with being small. Number 3. Environment, influence, and strategic rivalry. You are the average of the voices you listen to, the content you consume, and the standards you accept as normal. Right now, somewhere in the world, there is someone your age building an empire while you debate whether to take the risk. The difference between you and them is not talent, not luck, not even opportunity. The difference is the quality of their influences and the strategic nature of their rivalries. Most people seek validation from those beneath them and avoid confrontation with those above them. They surround themselves with cheerleaders who applaud mediocrity and avoid mentors who demand excellence. But this comfortable arrangement is precisely what keeps them comfortable and unsuccessful. True growth happens only when you deliberately place yourself in the presence of those who make you feel inadequate, then use that discomfort as fuel for transformation. Imagine a swordsmith's apprentice who practices only against weaker opponents. His confidence grows, his ego inflates, but his skills stagnate. Now imagine another apprentice who seeks out master swordsmen, who loses every battle but learns from every defeat. The first apprentice remains forever mediocre. The second becomes legendary. I began to study 3 modern princes who had conquered different kingdoms. Jeff Bezos, who understood that time is the ultimate currency, and built Amazon by thinking decades ahead while competitors thought in quarters. Warren Buffett, who mastered the patience to wait for perfect opportunities while others chased every shiny trend. Elon Musk, who learned to use debt not as burden but as leverage, borrowing against future success to accelerate present growth. These men became more than inspiration. They became my invisible competition. Every decision I made, I asked, what would Bezos do? How would Buffett think? What risk would Musk take? This was not imitation. This was strategic rivalry with greatness itself. The turning point came when I stopped seeking their approval and started seeking to surpass them. Admiration is passive. Rivalry is active. When you transform your heroes into competitors, you tap into a primal drive that pushes you beyond what you thought possible. You stop asking for permission to be great and start demanding greatness from yourself. But rivalry without strategy is just fantasy. I studied their patterns, their philosophies, their decision-making frameworks. Bezos taught me that every day is day one if you think like a beginner obsessed with improvement. Buffett showed me that wealth compounds not through luck, but through relentless patience and disciplined focus. Musk demonstrated that impossible deadlines create impossible solutions if you are willing to embrace impossible pressure. I began to consume only content that challenged my assumptions and expanded my capabilities. I replaced news with biographies. I replaced entertainment with education. I replaced social media with strategic learning. Every book, every interview, every piece of content became a weapon in my arsenal of growth. The voices in your head right now are not your own. They are echoes of everyone you have ever listened to, every influence you have ever absorbed. If those voices speak of limitation, of fear, of reasons why you cannot win, then you have been listening to the wrong teachers. Change your influences, and you change your internal dialogue. Change your internal dialogue, and you change your destiny. Your competition is not the person sitting next to you. Your competition is the person you could become if you had the courage to learn from giants and the audacity to believe you can become one yourself. Number 4, time is an asset in defined goals. Time is the only currency that matters, and you have been spending it like a fool. Every hour wasted on meaningless entertainment, every evening lost to mindless scrolling, every weekend sacrificed to empty socializing is an hour stolen from the empire you could be building. The wealthy understand something the poor never grasp. Time is not meant to be killed. It is meant to be invested. While others rest, you must learn. While others consume, you must create. While others drift through their evenings in passive entertainment, you must transform those hours into the raw material of your transformation. The person you become is determined not by the hours you work for others, but by the hours you invest in yourself. Picture two seeds planted on the same day. One receives water and sunlight only when convenient, when the conditions are perfect, when the gardener feels motivated. The other receives daily attention, consistent care, strategic nourishment regardless of weather or mood. Which seed becomes the mighty tree? Which one withers in mediocrity? Your relationship with time determines which seed you become. Even while trapped in my conventional job, I refused to accept that my growth had to wait for perfect conditions. My mornings became sacred hours of learning before the world woke up. My commute transformed into a mobile university. My lunch breaks became strategy sessions with myself. I treated every spare moment as an investor treats capital, something too precious to waste, too valuable to spend carelessly. The shift in thinking was profound. I stopped seeing free time as time to escape from my goals and started seeing it as time to accelerate toward them. Every moment became an opportunity to close the gap between who I was and who I needed to become. The television went silent. The social gatherings became less frequent. The comfortable distractions lost their power over me. But time without direction is just busyness disguised as progress. Goals are not wishes. Goals are specific, measurable declarations of war against your current circumstances. If your goal is to be wealthy, you are fooling yourself. Wealthy is not a destination. It is a vague direction that leads nowhere. But if your goal is to earn $10,000 per month within 18 months through a specific skill applied in a specific market, then you have something you can attack with daily actions. I learned to break down every ambitious goal into daily actions, so small they felt almost insignificant, yet so consistent they became unstoppable. Want to master investing? Read one page about investing every day. Want to build a business? Make one sales call every day. Want to develop expertise? Write one thoughtful post about your field every day. The magic is not in the size of the action. The magic is in the compound effect of consistency, applied over time. Focus is what transforms scattered effort into concentrated power. When you have 10 goals, you have no goals. When you have 3 clear goals, you have a strategic plan. When you have one obsession, you have a path to mastery. The successful concentrate their efforts like a laser beam. The unsuccessful spread their energy like a flashlight. Every successful person I studied had one thing in common. They treated time like their most valuable possession and goals like their most sacred contracts with themselves. Your time is your life converted into hours. How you spend those hours determines not just what you achieve, but who you become. Stop spending time and start investing it. Stop setting wishes and start declaring intentions. The empire you seek is built one strategic hour at a time. Number 5, physical entry into spaces of power. Knowledge without proximity is just academic entertainment. You can read every book about wealth, watch every interview with billionaires, and study every strategy for success. But until you place yourself physically in the rooms where power congregates, you remain a scholar of greatness rather than a practitioner of it. The modern palaces are not built of marble and gold. They are built of conferences, masterminds, and invitation-only gatherings where the ambitious come to sharpen themselves against other blades. Most people consume wisdom from the safety of distance. They watch from the audience, they listen from the sidelines, they learn from the cheap seats. But influence is not transmitted through screens or books alone. It is transmitted through presence, through proximity, through the electric energy that exists only when ambition meets ambition in the same space at the same time. Think of a blacksmith who studies metallurgy in books but never approaches the forge. He may understand the theory of steel, but he will never feel the heat that transforms raw iron into weapons. The heat you need exists in rooms where your current self feels intimidated, where your bank account feels inadequate, where your achievements feel small. That discomfort is not a warning. It is a compass pointing toward growth. The first conference I attended cost me more money than I had. I put it on credit, knowing that I was either investing in my transformation or financing my destruction. Walking into that room, surrounded by people who spoke casually about deals I could barely comprehend, I felt like an imposter. But that feeling of not belonging was precisely why I needed to be there. I realized that studying greatness from afar is like trying to learn to swim by reading about water. The concepts make sense intellectually, but the reality remains foreign until you submerge yourself in the actual environment. In that room, I heard conversations that rewired my understanding of what was possible. I witnessed deals being made with handshakes worth more than my annual salary. I observed how power moves, how influence spreads, how opportunities are created and captured. But proximity without preparation is just expensive tourism. Before every event, I researched every speaker, every sponsor, every potential connection. I came armed not with business cards but with value propositions. I prepared questions that demonstrated insight, not ignorance. I crafted introductions that offered solutions, not solicitations. The investment in being present forced me to become someone worthy of being there. When you pay for access to excellence, you create internal pressure to rise to that standard. When you surround yourself with people who operate at a higher level, you unconsciously begin to elevate your own standards. When you place yourself in environments where mediocrity is not tolerated, you stop tolerating it in yourself. I began to see debt not as bondage but as leverage, when used strategically for growth rather than consumption. The money I borrowed to attend those events was not debt. It was tuition for a university that existed for only 3 days, taught by professors who earned more in a month than I had earned in years. Each event became a laboratory for testing my growth. Could I hold conversations with people whose businesses generated millions? Could I present ideas that earned respect rather than polite dismissal? Could I navigate the social dynamics of rooms where everyone was evaluating everyone else for potential value? The transformation was not gradual. It was immediate and dramatic. Being in the presence of operational excellence raised my standards for my own performance. Hearing casual discussions of massive opportunities expanded my sense of what was possible. Witnessing the decision-making speed of successful people accelerated my own ability to act. Your current environment has trained you to think, speak, and act within certain boundaries. Those boundaries feel natural because they are all you know, but they are not walls. They are simply the edges of your current world. Step into a larger world, and you will discover that you are capable of filling more space than you ever imagined. Number 6. Investing in oneself and overcoming limits. The greatest investment you will ever make is not in stocks, real estate, or businesses. It is in the transformation of your own capabilities. But here is the cruel truth. The investments that change you the most are the ones that terrify you, the ones that stretch your resources beyond comfort, the ones that remove your option to retreat into familiar mediocrity. Most people invest only what they can afford to lose, which guarantees they will never invest enough to win. They choose safety over transformation, comfort over growth, the familiar prison over the uncertain palace. But transformation requires risk that feels dangerous, investment that feels impossible, commitment that burns the bridges back to who you used to be. Imagine a caterpillar that refuses to enter the cocoon because the process feels too uncomfortable, too uncertain, too expensive in terms of energy and risk. It remains forever earthbound, forever limited, forever wondering what it might have become if it had found the courage to transform. The cocoon is not punishment. It is the investment required for wings. $4,000, That was the price of the course that would either accelerate my transformation or bankrupt my attempt at it. I did not have $4,000. I did not have $400. But I understood something that my previous self would have called insane. Sometimes you must bet everything on yourself before you have evidence that you are worth the bet. I borrowed the money, knowing that failure was no longer an option. When you invest money you cannot afford to lose in your own development, you create a psychological pressure that forces results. Comfort is the enemy of growth. When retreat becomes impossible, you discover capabilities you never knew you possessed. The moment I made that payment, I felt the familiar world shift beneath my feet. This was not a purchase. This was a declaration of war against my limitations. This was me telling the universe that I was ready to become dangerous, ready to become valuable, ready to become someone who could command the success I had only dreamed about. But the money was just the entry fee. The real investment was what happened next. Sleepless nights absorbing every lesson. Uncomfortable conversations with successful people who challenged every assumption I held about business and money. Daily actions that felt impossible, but became inevitable once I removed the option of quitting. The course was designed to break you before it built you. It forced you to confront every excuse, every limitation, every comfortable lie you had told yourself about why you could not succeed. It demanded that you think at the level of someone already successful, act with the urgency of someone whose future depended on their next decision, and persist with the determination of someone who had burned every bridge back to mediocrity. I learned that discomfort is not something to avoid. It is something to seek. Every time you invest in something that scares you, you expand your capacity to handle larger challenges, bigger opportunities, greater success. Every time you choose the safe option, you train yourself to remain small. The return on that investment was not measured in the information I received. It was measured in the person I became. Someone who could make $4,000 decisions without paralyzing fear. Someone who could see opportunity where others saw risk. Someone who understood that betting on yourself is not gambling. It is the only rational choice. Your potential is not limited by your current resources. It is limited by your willingness to invest those resources, and more, in becoming someone worthy of the success you desire. When you truly invest in yourself, you discover that you are not making a purchase. You are making a transformation, and transformations, by their very nature, are irreversible. Number 7. Preparation and social relevance. In a world full of people seeking to take, the one who comes prepared to give wields a power that opens every door. Most people approach successful individuals with their hands extended, their needs visible, their desperation poorly disguised as networking. But the strategic mind approaches with solutions, with value, with something that makes the powerful pause and pay attention. You cannot build meaningful relationships with people who operate at a higher level by positioning yourself as a supplicant. They are surrounded by people who want something from them. They are starved for people who want to give something to them. When you shift from taking to contributing, you transform from a burden into an asset. Consider the difference between two visitors approaching a king. The first arrives with empty hands and urgent needs, speaking of his problems and hoping for charity. The second arrives with intelligence about enemies, solutions to existing problems, opportunities that align with the king's interests. Which visitor receives an audience? Which visitor is remembered? Which visitor is invited to return? Before every event, every meeting, every strategic encounter, I began a ritual of preparation that transformed me from observer to participant. I researched not just who would be there, but what challenges they faced, what opportunities they were pursuing, what value I could uniquely provide. I arrived not as a fan or a student, but as a resource. I studied their businesses, their recent moves, their public statements about goals and challenges. I prepared specific questions that demonstrated understanding rather than ignorance. I crafted brief presentations of ideas that could solve their problems or accelerate their objectives. I became someone worth talking to rather than someone seeking something from them. The shift was dramatic. Instead of awkward small talk and forgettable introductions, I found myself in substantive conversations about real challenges and opportunities. Instead of being politely dismissed, I was invited to continue conversations over dinner, over private calls, over exclusive gatherings. I had transformed from a consumer of their attention to a contributor to their success. But preparation alone was not enough. I needed to become genuinely useful, permanently valuable, strategically necessary. I began to build something that successful people wanted access to. A community, a platform, a resource that served their interests while advancing mine. This was not manipulation. This was alignment. Every person I met, every relationship I built, every connection I made became part of a larger strategy. Not to use them, but to become useful to them. To position myself not as someone seeking favors, but as someone capable of creating mutual value. To evolve from networking to partnership. I learned that influence is not about who you know. It is about who needs to know you. When you become a solution to problems that matter to powerful people, you become powerful. When you become a source of opportunities for those who create opportunities, you become indispensable. The most successful people I encountered were not selfish. They were strategic. They understood that lasting success comes from building ecosystems of mutual value rather than extracting temporary benefits from one-sided relationships. They surrounded themselves with other value creators, because value creators amplify each other. Your relevance in any room is determined not by your credentials or your connections, but by your ability to contribute to the success of others. When you walk into spaces of power carrying solutions rather than problems, offering value rather than seeking it, you discover that the doors you thought were closed were simply waiting for someone worth opening them for. Become that person, and every room becomes accessible. Every relationship becomes possible. Every level of success becomes achievable. Number 8. Social intelligence in selective environments. Power recognizes power, but it must first be demonstrated through strategic social intelligence. In rooms where every conversation could change your life, where every introduction could unlock opportunities worth millions, where every relationship could accelerate or destroy your ambitions, your ability to navigate the subtle games of influence determines whether you emerge as a player or remain a spectator. These environments operate by rules that are never spoken but always enforced. Understanding social hierarchies, reading unspoken signals, recognizing who holds real influence versus who merely projects it becomes as crucial as any technical skill you possess. Miss these subtleties, and you will find yourself marginalized despite your preparation. Master them, and you will discover that access to power is earned through demonstration of worthiness to wield it. Picture the court of Florence during Machiavelli's time, where a single misread gesture could mean exile or execution, where alliances shifted like shadows, where the most dangerous people appeared the most charming. Now imagine Wall Street, Silicon Valley, or any gathering of modern entrepreneurs. The weapons have changed, but the game remains the same. Your survival and success depend on your ability to play it with both sophistication and authenticity. Before entering any strategic environment, I began to map the landscape like a general studying a battlefield. Who were the real decision makers versus the apparent ones? Which relationships were solid versus which were simply transactional? What were the unspoken tensions, the hidden opportunities, the alliance structures that determined how influence flowed? I learned to listen for what was not said as carefully as what was. When someone spoke about their successes, I noted which challenges they avoided mentioning. When they discussed their plans, I identified which resources they needed but were too proud to ask for. When they shared their philosophies, I recognized which beliefs they held despite evidence to the contrary. This was not manipulation. This was fluency in the language of high-stakes social dynamics. Every environment has its own dialect of power, its own customs of respect, its own protocols for advancement. Learning these languages was not optional if I wanted to be taken seriously by people who could transform my trajectory with a single decision. I discovered that confidence without competence was quickly exposed, but competence without confidence was rarely recognized. The people who thrived in these environments had learned to project authority while remaining genuinely curious, to demonstrate value while staying authentically humble, to be memorable without being desperate for attention. The art was in calibration. Too aggressive, and you would be marked as dangerous and excluded. Too passive, and you would be dismissed as irrelevant and ignored. Too transparent, and you would be seen as naive and manipulated. Too calculating, and you would be recognized as untrustworthy and avoided. I learned to enter every room with 3 goals: to understand the power structure, to identify genuine opportunities for mutual value, and to plant seeds for future relationships without appearing to harvest them immediately. Some conversations were about immediate opportunities. Others were investments in relationships that might pay dividends years later. The successful people in these environments shared a common trait. They thought in terms of long-term relationship capital rather than short-term transactional gains. They understood that reputation was more valuable than any single deal. That trust was more powerful than any individual connection. That consistency of character was more important than brilliance of strategy. Your ability to thrive in environments of concentrated ambition and resources depends on your understanding that every interaction is both a test and an opportunity. Every conversation reveals your level of sophistication. Every response demonstrates your worthiness for inclusion. Every relationship you build or burn affects your access to future opportunities. Master the unspoken rules and doors open. Ignore them and they close permanently. Number 9. Influence and the psychology of selling. Every empire begins with the ability to sell an idea, a vision, a possibility that exists only in the mind of the visionary until they can transfer that vision into the minds of others. Money is not earned through production alone. It is earned through persuasion, through your ability to help others see what they cannot see, want what they have not wanted, believe what they have not believed. But selling is not manipulation. Selling is service at the highest level. It is the art of identifying genuine human needs and connecting those needs with genuine solutions. When you master this art, you do not take money from people. You create value so compelling that money flows toward you as naturally as water flows downhill. Most people fail at selling because they approach it from a position of need rather than service. They focus on what they want to gain rather than what they have to give. They speak about their products rather than their customers' problems. They demonstrate features rather than delivering transformations. But the master of influence reverses this entire equation. Think of a doctor who has discovered a cure for a disease that has plagued humanity. Does the doctor hesitate to sell this cure because selling feels uncomfortable? Does the doctor worry about seeming pushy when lives hang in the balance? Of course not. The doctor understands that withholding the solution would be the greater crime. When I finally understood this principle, everything changed. I stopped seeing selling as taking and started seeing it as giving. I stopped focusing on my need to make money and started focusing on my customers' need for solutions. I stopped talking about what I was offering and started listening to what they were lacking. The transformation began in my own mind. I had to believe with absolute certainty that what I was offering was more valuable than what I was asking in return. This was not arrogance. This was mathematical certainty. If I could help someone earn $10,000 by investing $1,000 with me, then not making that offer would be a disservice to both of us. But belief alone was not sufficient. I had to develop the skills to communicate that value clearly, compellingly, and authentically. I studied the psychology of human decision-making. I learned that people buy emotionally and justify rationally. I discovered that features tell but benefits sell. I understood that stories persuade more powerfully than statistics. The key breakthrough was recognizing that every sale begins long before money is mentioned. It begins with establishing trust, understanding needs, and positioning yourself as the guide who can help them navigate from their current painful reality to their desired future state. The transaction is simply the moment when they decide that future is worth the investment. I practiced this philosophy in every conversation, not just formal sales situations. When I spoke at events, I was selling ideas. When I wrote content, I was selling perspectives. When I networked with successful people, I was selling myself as someone worth their continued attention and investment. The most successful people I encountered had mastered this art without becoming artificial. They had learned to present their value so clearly and compellingly that people fought to access it rather than running from it. They had developed such confidence in what they offered that rejection felt impossible and acceptance felt inevitable. Your ability to influence others through authentic persuasion determines not just your income, but your impact. When you can help others see possibilities they could not see alone, achieve results they could not achieve alone, become someone they could not become alone, you stop being a vendor and start being a valuable resource. Master the art of ethical influence, and you will never struggle for opportunities, resources, or success. You will become someone that value flows toward, someone that opportunities seek out, someone that wealth naturally gravitates to. Number 10, the mathematics of ambition. Wealth is not mysterious. It is mathematical. Behind every fortune lies a formula so precise that it can be calculated, replicated, and accelerated by anyone willing to trade hope for strategy and wishes for systems. The reason most people remain poor is not lack of opportunity. It is lack of clarity about exactly how much they want to earn and exactly what they must do to earn it. Dreams are the enemy of riches. Dreams are vague, emotional, comfortable. They allow you to feel ambitious without requiring you to be specific. But goals are mathematical equations. Goals have numbers, deadlines, and measurable milestones. Goals can be broken down, tracked, adjusted, and achieved through consistent application of proven formulas. When you say you want to be wealthy, you are dreaming. When you say you want to earn $1 million within 36 months through building a digital marketing agency that serves local restaurants, you are strategizing. The first statement inspires feelings. The second statement demands actions. I learned to transform every ambition into mathematics. $1 million becomes approximately $2,800 per day. $2,800 per day becomes specific services sold to specific customers at specific price points. Specific services require specific skills applied with specific systems over specific timeframes. Every layer of specificity moves you closer to inevitability. But mathematics without action remains academic. I created tracking systems that turned abstract goals into daily realities. Revenue targets, conversion rates, customer acquisition costs, lifetime customer values. Every important element of my business became a number that I monitored, analyzed, and improved. The power of this approach was immediate and transformational. When you know exactly how much you need to earn each day, week, and month, every decision becomes strategic. Time wasted becomes visible. Opportunities missed become painful. Progress achieved becomes motivating. You stop hoping for success and start engineering it. I discovered that successful people think in systems, not events. They do not hope to get lucky once. They create systems that generate consistent results over time. They understand that 10% improvement in 10 different areas creates exponential rather than linear growth. They optimize for compound returns rather than immediate gratification. The mathematics revealed something crucial. Consistency matters more than intensity. Earning $100 per day for 365 days generates more wealth than earning $10,000 once and then nothing for months. Building sustainable systems that generate predictable results trumps hoping for occasional windfalls. But numbers without meaning become soulless. The mathematics had to connect to a larger purpose, a compelling reason that justified the discipline required to achieve the goals. Money for its own sake was insufficient motivation for the level of commitment required. Money as a tool for freedom, impact, and legacy provided the emotional fuel needed for mathematical precision. I began to see every setback as data rather than defeat. When campaigns failed, I analyzed why and adjusted the variables. When sales were slow, I examined the numbers to identify bottlenecks and inefficiencies. When growth stagnated, I looked for the mathematical levers that could accelerate progress. This approach transformed failure from something to be feared into something to be studied. Every mistake became feedback. Every challenge became a problem to be solved through better mathematics. Every obstacle became an opportunity to improve the system. Your financial destiny is not determined by luck, connections, or circumstances. It is determined by your willingness to transform emotional desires into mathematical certainties, and then execute those mathematics with relentless consistency. Numbers do not lie. Systems do not break promises. Mathematics does not care about your feelings, but mathematics will deliver exactly what you design it to deliver if you have the discipline to trust the process more than you trust your emotions. Number 11. Hunger as a driving force. The most dangerous moment in any ambitious journey is not when you fail. It is when you succeed just enough to become comfortable. Comfort is the assassin of greatness. It whispers that you have done enough, earned enough, become enough. It seduces you into believing that the gap between who you are and who you could become is no longer worth bridging. But I have discovered that hunger is not a condition to be cured. It is a power to be cultivated. The tension between your current reality and your possible future is not pain to be eliminated. It is fuel to be harnessed. The most successful people I have studied have learned to maintain this tension deliberately, to keep themselves perpetually dissatisfied with anything less than their full potential. Picture a lion that has eaten just enough to survive but not enough to thrive. It could rest in the shade, content with its current state, accepting that survival is sufficient. Or it could use its remaining hunger to hunt for a larger prey, to claim a better territory, to become not just a survivor but a ruler. The choice between comfort and conquest is made new each day. As my income grew and my lifestyle improved, I felt the seductive pull of satisfaction. The desperate urgency that had driven my initial transformation began to fade. The financial pressure that had forced innovation and speed was replaced by a more comfortable pace. I realized I was in danger of becoming successful enough to stop becoming more successful. This recognition forced me to create artificial hunger, deliberate dissatisfaction, strategic discomfort. I raised my standards before my income caught up. I set goals that required me to become someone I had never been. I surrounded myself with people whose achievements made my current success feel like the beginning, rather than the destination. The practice became ritual. Every morning, I spent time contemplating not what I had achieved, but what remained possible. I visualized the person I could become if I refused to settle for the person I currently was. I made the gap between reality and possibility visceral, immediate, compelling enough to drive action despite comfort. This was not self-torture. This was self-engineering. I was deliberately maintaining the psychological conditions that produced breakthrough results. I was refusing to let success become the enemy of greater success. I was treating hunger as a strategic advantage rather than a temporary inconvenience. I learned to celebrate achievements briefly and then immediately refocus on what came next. Each milestone became a stepping stone rather than a resting place. Each level of success became proof of what was possible rather than evidence of what was sufficient. The key was understanding that motivation is not sustained through inspiration alone. It is sustained through systems that regenerate hunger, that refresh ambition, that prevent the gradual erosion of drive that destroys most potentially great careers. You must engineer your own dissatisfaction with mediocrity. I created visual reminders of what my life could become. I wrote detailed descriptions of the person I was becoming and read them daily. I established relationships with people operating at levels that made my current achievements feel small. I set financial goals that required me to think and act beyond my current capabilities. This manufactured hunger became more powerful than the natural hunger that had initiated my journey. Natural hunger can be satisfied. Manufactured hunger can be sustained indefinitely. It becomes a choice rather than a condition, a strategy rather than a circumstance. The people who achieve extraordinary results over decades rather than months understand this principle. They do not wait for external pressure to force growth. They create internal pressure that demands growth. They treat hunger as a renewable resource rather than a finite fuel. Your potential is not limited by your current circumstances. It is limited by your willingness to remain dissatisfied with your current circumstances. Cultivate that dissatisfaction. Nurture that hunger. Transform that tension into the driving force that compels you toward the person you have the potential to become. Number 12, strategic mastery and prince-like mindset. A prince does not hope for favorable conditions. A prince creates them. A prince does not wait for permission to seize opportunities. A prince recognizes that sovereignty begins with the courage to govern oneself with the same strategic ruthlessness used to govern kingdoms. Your life is not a democracy where every emotion gets a vote. It is a monarchy where your highest self must rule with wisdom, discipline, and uncompromising vision. Most people are subjects in their own lives, ruled by circumstances, governed by the opinions of others, enslaved by their own comfort zones. They wait for someone else to grant them permission to pursue their dreams. They seek validation before taking action. They allow fear to veto their ambitions. But the prince-like mind reverses this entire relationship with power. Machiavelli understood that fortune is a woman who yields to the bold and scorns the timid. Fortune does not reward those who approach her with humility and hope. She rewards those who approach her with strategy and strength. She tests every aspirant, but she surrenders to those who persist with intelligent aggression through her tests. I realized that every setback I had experienced, every failure I had endured, every obstacle I had encountered was not punishment. It was education. Fortune was teaching me the lessons I needed to govern my own destiny. She was showing me which strategies worked and which ones failed. She was preparing me to handle the success that would eventually be mine. The transformation required treating every challenge as a problem to be solved rather than a tragedy to be endured. When cash flow problems threatened my business, I approached them like a general approaches a siege. With calm analysis, creative tactics, and absolute determination to prevail. When competitors emerged, I studied them like a prince studies neighboring kingdoms, not with fear but with strategic interest in their weaknesses. I learned to make decisions from a position of strength rather than desperation. Even when resources were limited, I acted as if success was inevitable and temporary setbacks were simply the cost of education. I refused to allow circumstances to determine my identity or my actions. I began to shape circumstances through the force of my will and the precision of my strategy. This required a fundamental shift in how I related to risk. Most people see risk as danger to be avoided, but the prince sees risk as information to be analyzed and opportunity to be captured. Every risk carries within it the seeds of proportional reward. The key is not avoiding risk, but managing it strategically. I began to study not just successful people, but successful strategies. How did they think about time? How did they approach relationships? How did they handle failure? How did they make decisions under pressure? How did they maintain focus during long periods without visible results? These became the foundations of my own strategic framework. The prince-like mind does not operate on hope. It operates on probability shaped by strategic action. It does not wait for perfect conditions. It creates favorable conditions through intelligent effort consistently applied. It does not fear competition. It welcomes competition because competition validates the value of what it seeks to achieve. But strategy without execution remains philosophy. I had to develop the discipline to implement my strategic insights consistently, especially when emotions urge different actions. The prince governs not just external territories, but internal impulses. Self-mastery becomes the foundation of all other mastery. The most crucial realization was that mastery is never complete. The moment you believe you have mastered success is the moment you begin the journey toward failure. The prince remains perpetually vigilant, perpetually learning, perpetually adapting to new challenges and opportunities. Your life is your kingdom. Your decisions are your laws. Your habits are your culture. Your standards are your borders. Rule with the wisdom of someone who understands that sovereignty is not inherited, but earned through daily choices that favor long-term strategic advantage over short-term emotional comfort. There is a moment, somewhere between sleep and waking, when your mind touches something infinite. In that space, you are neither the person you were yesterday nor the person you will become tomorrow. You simply exist in pure potential. This is where transformation lives, not in the grand gestures or the dramatic declarations, but in these quiet moments when your soul recognizes its own vastness. The path you have walked today, through the corridors of strategic thinking and calculated ambition, has brought you to this threshold. You stand now where few dare to stand, between the comfortable illusion of limitation and the terrifying truth of your own power. Every principle we have explored, every strategy we have uncovered, every insight we have shared has been leading to this singular recognition. You are not meant to be ordinary. The very fact that you have traveled this far, absorbed these truths, felt the stirring of something greater within yourself proves that mediocrity was never your destiny. It was simply your starting point. Picture the ocean at dawn. The waves do not question their power to reshape coastlines. They simply move consistently, relentlessly, knowing that time and persistence will carve mountains into sand. You are that ocean. Your dreams, your ambitions, your strategic actions are those waves. The empire you seek to build is not some distant shore. It is the natural result of your own irresistible force meeting the malleable world. If this awakening resonates in your bones, if these truths have ignited something that was always waiting to burn, then join me in this continuous exploration of what it means to live as the architect of your own destiny. Subscribe to witness how princes are made in the modern world. The transformation has already begun. Your next decision will determine whether it accelerates or stagnates. Choose as if your future self is watching.